Who's that in this chart?
Who are we going to be using? We're going to be using Rabbi. That would be Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi would be probably down here. But the significant part is that he's up here as well.
He's a connection between Babel and...
Well, he's a connection between the Tanaim and the Amoraim, so that's why he's up there. And he's going to be quoted by Rabbi Yonason. I don't know if they're going to have Rabbi Yonason on here. They have Rabbi... That's Rabbi Yochanan. Okay. So, Amar Rabbi Yonason, Amar Rabbi. Rabbi Yonason says the name of Rabbi. You see in parentheses, Rabbi.
Rabbi.
He says like this. Ha'ichel shlishi shel truma atzma. Someone eats...
Top of page.
The top of page 35. Okay. Someone eats a third level of impurity of truma itself. So we've been discussing a lot of different types of sanctity. Basically, the more sanctified something is, the more susceptible to impurity it is. Even more levels of dilution to the impurity still make it impure, still matame. So if someone eats the third level of impurity of truma, so he becomes impure, that asur lechol, he's not allowed to eat truma, if that's the case, because we said that if someone eats a certain amount of something, he goes to that level. Umuta liga, but nevertheless he's allowed to touch it. Now, Ula, if you remember, said before that if you have 2 pages of your Gemara, on 34b, yeah, it's probably right at the beginning of that, Ula.
Yeah, 34b3.
B3. Ula said that if someone eats a third level of mundane food that was kept to the purity level of truma, the same thing. His body becomes impure from eating truma. So the difference between Ula and Rabbi Yonason is if the person is eating mundane food that's kept to the level of truma, or actual truma, which should be kept to the level of truma because that's the law. Okay. The Gemara now says v'itzicht Ula v'itzicht Rabbi Yonason, and I need to have both of these. This is common to have 2 statements. It's common for the Gemara to say why I need each of these Amoraim to state it. The Imi de Ula, we're on 35. If it would only tell me Ula was talking about food that was kept to the level of purity of truma, but it wasn't actually truma. And he said that if that food becomes impure, it could become impure to the level of that truma could become impure. See, again, anything that's more sanctified is more susceptible to impurity. So this is kept to the level of truma, and nevertheless it's susceptible to the levels of impurity of truma. That truma would be susceptible to because truma has a certain sanctity. So I need Ula's statement of how the person becomes contaminated, and I need Rabbi Yonasan's statement, or Rebbe's statement. If it would only have Ula's, so Hava Mina, I would have said, or thought, Hani Mili b'chulin shenasu al taras truma. That's only chulin, that's mundane food that's kept to the level of purity of truma. Aval truma, but truma itself, that's impure, and someone eats it, then b'negia nami aser. Then it would be forbidden for him to touch truma as well, and that we didn't say. See, the interesting thing is as follows, that you usually have something that's impure. You can have a person that's called an avatama. You can have a person or a vessel that comes in contact with that becomes a rishon. Then you have food that becomes a sheni. That's as far as it goes for mundane food. For truma food, if truma comes in contact with a sheni, it will actually become tameh. Even though normally a sheni doesn't pass on tameh. But because it's so sanctified, truma, it will become tameh from a secondary level of tameh, and it's called a shlishi. There's no such thing as a shlishi for mundane food, but there's a shlishi for chulin. Now, if you keep food to the purity level of truma, then that food, that chullin, can become a shlishi as well, if it's kept to the sanctity level of truma. Now, a shlishi of truma can never pass on truma, because that's as far as it goes. There's an exception, though. It can pass on to a revi for kodesh, for if it's a sacrifice. So sacrifice is even more susceptible to tumah. It can go to a fourth. Okay, but we're discussing here the shlishi of. So we said that although a shlishi can't make anything tameh, but if a person eats a shlishi, that level of impurity, he should not eat truma. He becomes that level. He should not eat truma. It has to do with maybe it's going to be in his mouth at the same time, even though it can't pass on any impurity. But that's the rule that we said, he should not eat it. But he's allowed to touch truma because he doesn't really become tameh. We consider him tameh because he ate a certain amount, but he can't pass it on to another level. I could have thought, if I only would have had ula, that this halacha is only by things that are kept to the level of tumah. I would have thought that if it's kept to the level of truma, but if it's truma itself, then maybe he shouldn't be allowed to touch food either. So I need itchich to Rabbi Yonasan. So I need Rabbi Yonasan to tell me that the law is the same, that you're not allowed to eat truma, but you're allowed to touch truma if someone ate a third level of impurity. V'imid Rabbi Yonasan, and if I would only have Rabbi Yonasan who says truma itself, then Havamin I would have said Hanimili Truma. When do I say this rule that there's this difference between eating and touching? That's only for Truma. Aval Chulin, when it comes to Chulin, Ba'achilin Amishari, I should even be allowed to eat. Maybe I could have said that Chulin, mundane food that's kept to a level of Truma, doesn't have this law of eating a certain amount makes you impure. Notice we say that chulin that's kept to a level of truma will become a shlishi. But maybe it doesn't have this law that when you eat it, it makes you impure that you can't eat truma. Who says that it goes so far? It's all just a fake. Well, it's not really a fake, but it's all being kept to a level of sanctity that it doesn't really have. To a purity that it really... You're making believe it has a sanctity because you're trying to be more strict about food, to keep it pure, but it really doesn't have that. Maybe we would say you're even allowed to eat truma, even though you've eaten this level of impurity. So tzrichi, it needs both. Okay. Yosef Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Bar Marta Kamed Rav Nachman. We had him once before, recently actually. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Bar Marta is speaking in front of Rav Nachman, V'Yosef V'Kamer, and he says the following: Ha'Eichel Shlishi Shel Chulin. Rav Nachman would be on this chart, but Rabbi Yitzchak would not be. Rav Nachman was a student of Rav Shmuel. Sorry? I assume so. How did he get the female in there?
Maybe he was Martha.
No, it's the English Martha.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, he says like this: Ha'echel shlishi shel chulin shenasu al taras hakodesh. Someone eats a third level of impurity. How did it become a third level of impurity if it's mundane food? So it was mundane food that was kept to the level of sanctity of a sacrifice.
So now we're not talking to the level of truma, we're just talking level of...
Now, really it should go another level. Because kept to the level of a sacrifice should become a fourth.
Right, you said that.
But we actually don't say that unless it's a sacrifice itself. By truma, we brought things that are kept to its level to be at its level as well, which was only a shlishi. For a sacrifice, if it could go one more step, but that's only for an actual sacrifice. Things that are kept to that level don't actually do that last step. That last step is exclusive. That's what we're going to see here. So he eats a shlishi, and it's chulin shenas al taras hakodesh. So we say tar lechel b'kodesh. He can eat. He's pure to eat kodesh. She'ein lecha davar she'oser revi'i b'kodesh ala kodesh m'kodesh b'lvad. Because the only thing that could make a revi'i is the actual something that's sanctified as a sacrifice, but not something that's just kept to that level. And Rashi points out that even something that's declared, where was I see kedusha sapeh, like the meat of a sacrifice. But something that's just designated holy with kedusha sapeh, we don't say that.
So when Yitzchak was on the Akeda, was he a shlishi or a revi?
So he's prepared.
What do you think of these things?
I mean, because he was declared to do it, and he actually almost
Right.
did it. So how far did he go?
Mekadosh b'peh, no?
Well, you see, there's in explaining. It's hard to explain all of these levels because we're actually talking about that he came in contact with Tumah. That's what made him a shlishi. You follow? There's like, I don't know. It's anyway. We're assuming here that if it won't work for Kodesh, it also shouldn't work for Truma. We just gave a more strict level, something that was kept to the sanctity of a sacrifice, and we gave a leniency. That someone that eats that, even though it came in contact with a third level of impurity and he eats it, but he can still eat Kodesh. Because the only thing that could make a revi'i would be actual Kodesh. But we didn't say this before, and we would assume that the same thing should apply to things that were kept to the level of Truma. And we said that you weren't allowed to eat Truma. So this is a little interesting. Masav Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama asked a question. Shlishi, this is a quote from before, where Rabbi Eliezer says, there was a machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. If someone, according to Rabbi Yeshua, we said, a shlishi, if someone eats a third level of tumah, he becomes a sheni lakodesh. He becomes a second level of impurity for sanctified food. What are you looking for, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua?
No, Rabbi Chama.
Oh, Rami Bar Chama is a student of Rav Chizda. So, here's Rav Chizda, here's Rami Bar Chama. He married Rav Chizda's daughter. He passed away, and then Rava married her. He had a brother, but it's not in here. So, a third level of impurity makes a person a second level of impurity for sanctified food. Third level of impurity for truma makes a person a second level for sanctified food. Vein sheni letruma, but not for truma. And what are we talking about? B'chulin shenasu al taras truma. How did it become a third level of impurity? Well, it was kept to the level of truma. That's how it got to be a third level. Or else, if it was just regular chulin, it would have stopped at a second. So it's.
My someone who doesn't understand how you take chulin and you make it on the level of tahara.
Oh, so what you're doing here is like this.
Is
That,
it special?
what you do is like this. You're going to need to take truma off this because you have to give something to the kohen.
Right.
The rule is if the truma becomes impure, so then the kohen can't eat it.
Right.
And what you're going to do is you're going to try to keep all your food until you take truma. You're going to try to keep it at the level of purity so that you should be able to separate the truma and it's not tummy. So this food, you're keeping it to the purity level that truma needs to be kept on. And possibly you're keeping all your food to that level because you have truma hanging around sometimes.
Yeah, of course.
So because of this, you're going to keep it to the level of truma, that even if something is a secondary level of truma, if that would contact this food, that would make it tummy as well. So you're practicing the truma laws, the tara laws of that would be applicable to truma. And so therefore, the interesting thing is that it's not just a fake, but it actually becomes that level of tumah because you're keeping it to that level. The tumah actually catches it. It actually absorbs. It actually contracts the tumah because you're keeping it to that level.
Right. So if you didn't keep it so pure, and it came in contact with it, it wouldn't have a bunch of effects.
Right.
Okay.
So as a practical matter, this is after the time that you've gathered the food, but before you've separated truma.
That would make sense to do this, unless you're a Kohen, and you have to keep everything to that level because you have truma here and chullin there, and then that would be the normal case. So, the Gemara says, why does...
It said in one of the footnotes, I think from yesterday or the day before, when we were saying that certain things were prepared on the level of Kadosh. So it says this was mostly Kohanim in Yerushalayim who did this.
Oh, okay, very good. Okay.
Are there other Kohanim in other places? Didn't just
Right. And other people that weren't Kohanim didn't necessarily do it.
Okay.
sometimes you have the people he shiretz off him.
It says mostly.
I read, who are we talking about? Rabbi Margolius. I read the Bais Hamikdash was destroyed because of Kamta and Bar Kamta. So one of them came to the party, and he wasn't invited, right? And the host said they wanted to send him out, and all the rabbis were quiet. So he explained that the rabbis were quiet was because these people were very careful who they ate with because of the purity laws. This person wasn't as pure, so they didn't want to get involved in this, because Yakira Yerushalayim would never go to a meal unless they knew who else was invited, because their things could become impure. So because of this, you can imagine the rating level people had. He's not pure enough. He's not pure, and that's when we talk about the lack of Abbas Yisrael. It was a religious. Besides there were political issues, but there were also religious issues that came into play.
Can you imagine the caterer? Okay, how many entrees? 400, fine. How many are you eating? 50? Oh, I'll give you a deal.
So the Gemara says, the interesting thing here is that we have something that's a third level of truma, but it's making something that's sanctified not into a fourth level, it's making it into a second level. It's going back one level. We just said a minute ago that from Rav Yitzchak, Bar Shmuel Bar Martha, we said that you can't make Kodesh impure through a third level. We said it has to be really Kodesh, not Chullin Shenasu Al Taras Kodesh. It has to be real Kodesh. To get to a fourth level, it needs to be the real sanctified sacrifice. Now we're saying that mundane food that's kept to the level of truma, that's a third level impurity, can make not only a fourth level of impurity for sacrifice, but it makes it so impure that it goes back to being a second level. Amai halav kodesh mekudeshu, but it's not the actual sacrifice. How does it make it impure? It was a third level of impurity, of something that wasn't even a sacrifice. So Amalei responds. Who's the Amalei? Does it say? Is it Rav Nachman? Rav Yitzchak. It's Rav Yitzchak is responding. Hanach l'truma shetarasa tumei yitzel hakodesh. Leave truma alone, because yes, we said that if something was sanctified or kept to the level of sanctity, it won't make a fourth level. Granted, but here we're dealing with truma, and truma, even though you think it's sanctified, even though you think it's pure, and you think it's only a third level of impurity, but we consider it much more impure because when it comes to sacrificial food, we don't consider the truma purity as real purity. it's sort of like, are my hands clean? Well, it depends what you want to do. If you want to touch the Gemara, they're clean. But if you wanted to eat, I should probably wash them. And if I wash them, are they clean? Well, it depends what I want to do. For a surgery, they're not clean yet, but they're, So there's levels here of what's considered purity. So we're saying, yes, it was pure for truma, and you thought it was a third level. But for sacrificial food, that's not pure. And it's actually, we don't trust that level of purity, and we consider it even less, and therefore we'll make a sheni for sacrificial food. How do we know that we do this? That we don't consider one level of purity acceptable for another sanctity level. Minat Tamra. The Tanana was taught in the Mishnah. Big the Amart's Medras Leprushim. Okay. The rule is that someone that's a woman that's a Nida, or a man that's a Zav, that's an impurity, like maybe gonorrhea or something, or a Zava, which is also some abnormal flow of blood for a woman. If she sits on a chair, the chair becomes impure, to her level of impurity. The medras is a very strict level, the chairs and pillows and things that she sits on. And the same would be her clothing. So, clothing of an Amaretz, that means ignoramus. His clothing is considered, whether he's a Tamei Medras or not, whether he has a Tumah or not, it's always considered at this level. We don't trust it. For Purushim are the people that keep their food pure.
It says over here that according to one opinion, Martha was the brother of Rabbi, and according to a second opinion, Martha was the sister of Rabbi.
Is it man or a lady?
I did a Google search and it came up to the sefer called Husu in the Talmud.
But you said the first one was
Martha's brother.
brothers.
So
it's
that
either
was
a
a,
man or
Very nice.
it's a man. If it was his sister, it was a lady. What's so hard about that?
Rabchia meaning
It says, according to one opinion, Martha was the brother of Rabbi, and according to another opinion, Martha was the sister of Rabbi. See the commentaries on Sanhedrin 5.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
Usually it's ladies.
What is that?
Martha's usually ladies.
Right, usually it's the ladies' name. Big day, Purushim, but the garments of a Parush, someone that's careful to keep his everything pure, but his clothing is Medras Leichli Truma, is considered Tamei Medras for someone that keeps his food to the Truma purity levels. Big day Eichli Truma, in clothing of someone that keeps that eats Truma, is Medras L'Kodesh, is considered impure for someone that keeps that eats sacrificial food. So we have a source for the distinctions in purity levels, and the reason why someone that eats truma, that's third level of impurity, or chulin shenas al taras truma, that third level of impurity, has to consider himself a sheni for kodesh, is because he really wasn't pure at all for kodesh. We take it down a level for kodesh because we don't trust that level of purity for something that's more sanctified. Okay, that seems to be an answer. However, Rava says that's not a good answer. Because Midrasas Kamrit, you're talking about Tamei Medras. Shani Midrasas, the Medras, which means a chair, or something that you sit on, that's different. Over there you have to be more strict about this. Because Shema Teisha V'alei Mishtei Nida. Maybe his wife was in Nida and sat on the chair. So we're always going to need to consider chairs or something that would be sat on, or clothing that would be sat on, as to a level of purity. We're going to consider it impure to a higher level of sanctity. How?
In yesterday's Rambam, Parakidei, it says, it's talking about this, and it says that a woman who's sitting, even if she's sitting on something that's not makabel tumah, like a stone or a rock,
right,
she can still make tamei something that's under the rock.
Right. That's what it says. Yeah. Aval beperi, but when it comes to fruit, la yamrinan. we shouldn't say this because fruits should be kept all to the same level. You have a different when it comes to things that you sit on, but we don't have that difference when it comes to fruits. And Rabbi Yitzchak, okay, so Rav is pushing off the answer. However, for Rabbi Yitzchak, beperi nami amar, but Rabbi Yitzchak, he was talking about fruits or food that was kept to the level of truma, and nevertheless, he has to consider himself he has to consider impure at a secondary level of impurity when it comes to sacrificial food, and that we don't have a source for. Okay. Masiv Rabbi Yirmiyah Midifti. Rabbi Yirmiyah Midifti has a question. I don't know where he is in here. Umi amrinan beperi, and do you say this by fruits? That there's a difference in purity level. We don't say this by fruits. We consider all fruits, if they're pure, we consider them pure for all levels. V'hatana'an, it was taught in a Mishnah, Imam refrashti l'teicha revi'is kodesh neman. See, there was a little bit of a problem. There was an area that cut into, in between the north and the south in Israel. There was a land of Kutim. Now, the grapes that someone would be bringing from the north to the south, he would end up passing through this land, and if he wanted to bring the wine to the temple, so it would become impure as he passed through that area.
Wow. Just by the air?
I think it's because of the land. What going on the land is
so it would go through
Eretz Ha'amim.
I'm saying how it was not touching the land. Would it come through the air?
Yeah, maybe the
tameh?
person carrying it would be considered tameh.
But this land was what, impure? This
little small area was impure.
In Eretz Yisrael itself?
Yeah. So.
I'm sorry. It's
Tel Aviv.
I think also it was in yesterday's Rambam. It says that something like if a compartment was moving through the air, even without touching the ground. Exactly what you're saying, like an airplane. It was just moving through the air without touching the ground. This is in the Gemara. It says in Rambam that the thing is tummy.
Very good. Yeshakaya. They taught me in school that when you have a connection between two things that you're learning, it means that Hashem is happy with your learning.
That's what I'm saying.
So, if someone says, so someone would come from the north and he would want to bring wine, he would have to get wine from somewhere close by. So if he goes to an Amaretz and the person tells him, "Imamar hefrashti l'seicha revi'is kodesh neman," if the Amaretz would say that in this container of wine there's some wine that needs to be separated because it could be brought for I designated it to be brought for a sacrifice, so we trust it that it's pure, even though the person is ignoramus and he doesn't maybe keep the laws so carefully, but he definitely keeps the laws when it comes to a sacrifice. For truma we don't trust it, but for a sacrifice we do. So we ask, so we conclude, but the truma doesn't make the kodesh impure, because in there, what we mean truma doesn't make the kodesh impure means that you have in one container, you have stuff that may be wine that could have been separated for truma, which that he doesn't keep, so that we don't trust that it's pure. We have wine in the air that's going to be brought for a sacrifice that we do trust that it's pure. And nevertheless, we don't say that one contaminates the other. So, v'i amrit tarasa tumi etzel kodesh, and if you would say that the purity of one level is considered impure for the next level of sanctity, so titma truma l'kodesh, why doesn't it make it impure? So Amalei, he responds to this. Is this Rabbi Yitzchak?
Yeah, it says.
Rabbi Yitzchak responds to this. Tuma b'chiburin ka'amrit. You're asking about tuma that's in one container where it's connected. Tuma b'chiburin shani. Over there we don't view it like this. Over there we view it the migu, just as The meheman hakodesh, that he's trusted on the sanctity part, meheman nami truma, he's trusted also on the truma. When it's in one container, so then we say that it's all kept to one level of purity. When it's in separate containers, then we would say that different sanctity levels are trusted differently for their purity.
Why can't we? I'm sorry, I hate me. Why can't we say that within one container we're dealing with the minority, and we go by the majority? Therefore, the minority doesn't affect the majority. The two separate containers have two separate issues.
Yeah.
When in one container,
Let me ask you a
tell me
question.
quarter is
Let's say I borrow $100 from you,
forget it. I'll a couple bucks.
and I have a lot of bills of $100. So I take your $100 and I put it in my stack of $100. Do I say that $100 is nullified, and therefore I don't have to pay it back because I nullified it in my money?
Or not. I'm nervous. Look, guys, I swear. It's just hypothetical. Don't worry.
He never got the $100.
Oh, I know, but it's kidding.
Now, this, when it comes to nullification, we're not going to say that if one thing is pure, one thing is not pure. We're going to say that everything becomes. We're going to say that it becomes contaminated. We don't say nullification like that. When it comes to kosher laws, we can say that the thing that wasn't kosher. See, because this gives off impurity. So we don't say that it becomes nullified. It would make the next thing tamei. You follow? My example of $100 wasn't. I'm just showing that the nullification laws are not applicable always.
It's like radiation.
Uh-huh.
So you put a little radioactive stuff in there,
Uh-huh.
contaminates it.
It's more like fish. Like if the fish is not being looked at constantly, all the fish on the conveyor belt, you may end up with a can of dolphin, which you think you're getting tuna, but it's a whole dolphin in that can. It's not nullified the minority to the majority. You know what I'm saying? Like this is the difference between hechsher places that are like they look at the top layer of the barrel, and the other ones that have a conveyor belt and they're looking at all the fishes that are going by.
Uh-huh. I have to think about that. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same.
Oh.
Let me think. With the stronger coffee. Masav Rav Huna Bar Nosson. Rav Huna Bar Nosson has a question. Hasheni, maybe down near Rav Papa. Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua, but I'm not sure. Yeah. That's a good book. He mentioned Who's Who in the Talmud. There was a woman, Friedman. Shalamis Friedman. It's a good book if you can get a hold of it. Because it was an Aronson book, and Aronson is out of business. So. Hasheni Shebechulin, the second level of impurity by chulin.